moves like a guard and blocks shots like a force of nature, word travels fast. And in Philadelphia, word traveled like wildfire. At Roman Catholic High School, Griffin did not just play, he dominated.
According to high school basketball archives, he led Roman Catholic to back-to-back Philadelphia Catholic League championships in both his junior and senior years. That is not a fluke. That is a young man bending entire seasons to his will, 2 years running, in one of the toughest basketball cities in America. And the national honors came rolling in right behind him. According to national prep records from the year 2000, Griffin was named Parade's National Player of the Year, and he was selected to the McDonald's All-American team, the short list of the best high school players in the entire country. That is rare air. That is the kind of resume that puts a teenager on a path straight toward the NBA before he can legally vote. But here is the truth this story asks you to sit with from the very beginning. The gift was real. The shadow was real too. And the shadow traveled with him everywhere he went. Because before he could even finish high school the normal way, a fight with a teammate forced him out of the building. And that pattern would follow him for the rest of his life. It is one thing to read about a player's talent. It is another thing to read the first warning sign written right next to it. And with Eddie Griffin, that warning sign showed up early enough that it sits in the biographical record beside all those championships and honors. According to biographical sports records, Griffin finished his senior year through correspondence courses after fighting with a teammate. Stop and think about what that means. Here is a young man so gifted that he was the best high school player in the country on paper, and yet he was completing his final year of school from a distance, away from the building, because conflict had boiled over. The talent was in one column. The trouble was in another, and even then, you could see the two columns refusing to line up. We are going to handle this carefully, because Griffin was a teenager, and a teenager who could not always control his temper is still a kid trying to grow up under enormous pressure. But honesty matters here. This was not a one-time slip that got blown out of proportion. This was the first documented chapter in a pattern of conflict, a pattern that kept showing up again and again, no matter how high the basketball lifted him. And yet here is the part that tells you just how special the talent really was. The fight did not scare off the recruiters, not even close. According to recruiting coverage from that period, in the year 2000, Griffin remained a top national college prospect despite the incident. The colleges still came calling. The big programs still wanted him. Because when you are 6'9" with that kind of upside, people will look past a lot. They will tell themselves the talent will win out, that maturity will catch up, that the young man just needs the right place. He chose Seton Hall. And for one explosive season, it looked like the talent would finally outshine everything else. For one winter, Eddie Griffin made everybody who believed in him look like a genius. He arrived at Seton Hall University as a freshman, and he played like a young man who'd been waiting his whole life for the bigger stage. He did not ease in. He erupted. According to college basketball statistics from the 2000 to 2001 season, Griffin averaged 17.8 points, 10.7 rebounds, and 4.4 blocks per game. Read those numbers again, because that block total is the one that makes scouts lose their minds. 4.4 blocks a game from a freshman is not just good, that is a defensive anchor. That is a young man erasing shots at the rim like he owned the airspace above the paint. Add nearly 11 rebounds and almost 18 points a night, and you are looking at one of the most complete freshman seasons in the country. According to the Sporting News and the USBWA,
Griffin was named the nation's Freshman of the Year in 2001. Not one of the best freshmen, the best. Top of the entire class in a country full of future pros. This is the part of the story where the dream felt within reach. The defensive instincts, the timing, the way he could protect the rim and still run the floor. That was the package that made NBA scouts start whispering about a top draft pick. They could see the ceiling. They could practically taste it. A 6'9" shot blocker who could score and rebound at that age is exactly the kind of player a franchise builds around for a decade.
For a few months, the basketball was so loud, it almost drowned out everything else. Almost. Then, in January, it all came apart again. Another teammate, another altercation, and an exit nobody saw coming so soon. The same shadow that pushed him out of high school caught up to him in college, and it caught up to him fast. The Freshman of the Year, the future lottery pick, the player everybody wanted. His college career lasted exactly one season. According to major sports media reports from January 2001, Griffin left Seton Hall after his freshman year following an altercation with a teammate under what was described as acrimonious circumstances. That word matters. Acrimonious. This was not a quiet, friendly goodbye. This was bitter. This was tense. And it ended a college run that was supposed to last 2 or 3 brilliant years before he turned pro. One season of fireworks, and then the door closed. With his college path cut short, Griffin made the decision that the talent had been pointing toward all along. He entered the NBA draft early. On paper, it made sense. The ability was undeniable, and the league was already watching. But leaving under those circumstances meant he was carrying questions with him, questions that had nothing to do with whether he could play. And then, in the middle of all of it, life landed a blow that had nothing to do with basketball at all. According to biographical records, shortly before the draft, Griffin's half-brother, Marvin Powell, passed away of a heart condition. Picture the weight of that. A young man on the edge of the biggest moment of his career, the moment he had worked toward his entire life, and he was grieving a brother at the same time. Heartbreak stacked right on top of a turning point, with the whole world watching to see where his name would be called. On draft night, his name was supposed to be called early, but questions about his attitude were already costing him millions. Draft night is supposed to be the payoff, the night the work and the talent finally turn into a name, a team, and a contract.
For Eddie Griffin, it was all of that, but it came with a slide, and that slide told you exactly how nervous the league had become. By talent alone, Griffin had the profile of a player who could go near the very top of the draft. The size, the shot blocking, the freshman explosion, it all pointed toward an early call. But the conflicts followed him into that room, the way they followed him everywhere. The questions about his attitude, the high school incident, the bitter exit from Seton Hall, all of it weighed on teams who knew the ability was special, but worried about everything around it. And so he fell. According to NBA draft records from 2001, Griffin was selected 7th overall by the New Jersey Nets. But he never wore that jersey. Almost immediately, the Nets traded his rights to the Houston Rockets. According to transaction records from 2001, the deal sent Jason Collins, Brandon Armstrong, and Richard Jefferson to New Jersey in exchange for Griffin's rights. Think about that trade for a second. The Nets were willing to move a package of players to land him, and they were willing to flip him just as fast. That is what a high upside, high risk prospect does to a draft board. Everybody wants the talent, and everybody is calculating the risk at the very same time. So the kid from Philadelphia,
the one the city couldn't stop talking about, was headed to Houston.
New city, new team, a fresh start in a place that was betting on his ceiling and hoping the trouble had been left behind in Philly and New Jersey. In Houston, for a while, it looked like the doubters had it wrong. When a player slides on draft night because of doubts, there is only one way to answer those doubts. You go out and play. And in his first NBA season, Eddie Griffin did exactly that. He walked into a grown man's league as a teenager, fresh out of one college season, and instead of getting swallowed up, he held his ground.
According to NBA statistics from the 2001-2002 season, Griffin played 73 games for the Houston Rockets and averaged 8.8 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 1.84 blocks per game. Those are solid rookie numbers across the board, but it is that block number that really tells the story. He ranked 13th in the entire league in blocks that season. 13th. Among every shot blocker in the NBA, veterans, all-stars, established big men who had been protecting the rim for years, this rookie sat right there in the top 13. That is the moment the scouting reports came alive.
The same instincts that made him special in high school and college translated immediately to the pro game. He could read a play developing, time his jump, and erase a shot at the rim like he had been doing it for a decade. For a young team trying to build something, that kind of defensive presence is gold. You can teach a lot of things. You cannot teach a 6'9" kid how to swallow up the paint. The recognition followed. According to NBA records from 2002, Griffin was named to the NBA All-Rookie Second Team, official league honors confirming that the talent everyone whispered about was real and already producing at the highest level. For one season, the picture was clean. The risk looked worth it. Houston looked smart. He backed it up with a solid second season. But off the court, by his own account and according to reports, something heavier was taking hold. The second year is where the league finds out if you were a flash or a foundation. And on the court, Eddie Griffin answered that question the right way. He did not fade. He grew into a bigger role. According to NBA statistics from the 2002-2003 season, Griffin averaged 8.6 points, 6.0 rebounds, and 1.44 blocks across 77 games. And this time he was a starter, 66 starts on the year. That is a real jump in responsibility. Coaches do not hand a young player 66 starts unless they trust him to do a job night after night. The rebounding ticked up, the production held steady, and on paper, this was a young big man settling into a dependable NBA career. But here is where the story turns quiet and dark at the same time. Because while the numbers on the court stayed steady, something off the court was building that the box score could never show. According to published biographical sources, Griffin reportedly struggled with a dependency on alcohol, and as time went on, his off-court troubles escalated. We say this carefully, the way it deserves to be said. This was not a headline he chose. This was a battle that public reporting later described as a real and serious struggle, the kind that pulls at a person from the inside while the world only sees the player on the floor. And that is the heartbreaking contrast at the center of these years. In the arena, he looked like a professional doing his job, starting games, blocking shots, putting up steady numbers. Away from the arena, the weight was growing heavier, quietly behind the scenes, where the cameras and the stat sheets never reached. That kind of storm does not stay quiet forever. Sooner or later, it shows up where everyone can see it. And for Griffin, the breaking point came fast. By December of 2003, the Rockets had seen enough. Missed practices and a team fight ended his time in Houston. When the trouble finally surfaced in Houston, it surfaced loud. The same kind of conflict that had marked his exit from high school and his exit from college now arrived in the pros. And this time, it cost him his roster spot. According to major sports media reports from December of 2003, the Rockets released Griffin after he missed practices and was involved in a team fight. Read that, and you can almost feel the pattern repeating itself one more time. Missed practices, a fight, an organization deciding it had reached its limit. The talent was never the question in Houston. It was everything around the talent that finally broke the relationship apart. But this next part is important because it shows a young man trying to face what he was carrying. According to transaction and biographical records from January of 2004, Griffin signed with the New Jersey Nets, the very franchise that had drafted his rights and traded him away years earlier. On paper, it was a second chance. In reality, the season never happened for him. He missed the entire 2003-2004 campaign after entering an alcohol rehabilitation center. Sit with that for a moment. A young man, only a couple of years into his pro career, stepped away from the game entirely to get help. No statistics that season, no games, no highlights. Just a person trying to deal with something far bigger than basketball. We are not going to dress that up or tear it down. It takes something to walk away from a paycheck and a career to confront a struggle head on, and that is what the record shows he did. The basketball world has a short memory, but talent buys patience. And when he finally returned, it was in Minnesota, and for one season, it looked like a real comeback. Everybody loves a comeback, and for a while, Minnesota gave Eddie Griffin a real one. After a full year away from the game, after the release in Houston and the lost season, he got the thing every struggling player hopes for. Another door, opened by a team willing to take the chance. The Minnesota Timberwolves signed him to a one-year contract before the 2004-2005 season. A one-year deal is a careful kind of faith. It says, we believe in the talent, but we want to see it before we commit. And Griffin gave them something to believe in. According to NBA statistics from that 2004-2005 season, he appeared in 70 games, averaging 7.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1.7 blocks per game. Look at those numbers next to where he had been a year earlier. Out of the league, in rehabilitation, his career hanging by a thread. To come back and play 70 games, to grab 6.5 boards a night and protect the rim again, that is not a small thing. That is a man clawing his way back to relevance, fitting into a role on a veteran roster, doing the work, showing up. For the first time in a while, the story bent toward hope. And Minnesota responded the way you do when you start to believe again. According to transaction records from 2005, the Timberwolves re-signed Griffin to a 3-year contract with a player option in the 3rd year, starting in the 2005-2006 season. That is a real investment. That is an organization saying the comeback was no fluke, that they saw a future worth paying for. For a moment, it looked like the talent had finally won, like the kid Philly couldn't stop talking about had grown into a steady professional. But the same shadow was still there, waiting in the quiet, and the next season would pull the two halves of his life in completely opposite directions. Some seasons tell two stories at once, and the two stories refuse to agree. That is exactly what happened to Eddie Griffin in his first year under that new 3-year deal. On defense, he reached a personal peak. Everywhere else, the ground was sliding out from under him. According to NBA statistics from the 2005-2006 campaign, Griffin posted a career-high 2.11 blocks per game. Think about that. After everything, the release in Houston, the lost season, the long road back, he was protecting the rim better than he ever had at any point in his life. The instincts were not just intact, they had sharpened. On that one part of the floor, he was still elite,
still doing the thing that made scouts fall in love with him as a teenager. But the rest of the picture had gone cold. In that same season, his scoring fell to 4.6 points per game, a steep drop for a man who had averaged nearly 9 as a rookie. The role was shrinking. The minutes were thinner.
He was becoming a specialist, a defensive piece, instead of the building block Minnesota had paid for. And when a player's job gets that narrow that fast, it usually means his standing inside the organization is slipping too. Then the off-court weight surfaced in public again, and this time it left a mark that could not be quietly absorbed. According to an ESPN Wire report from June of 2006, a car crash that March drew serious scrutiny. The report described security footage that reportedly showed Griffin telling a store clerk he had been drinking and did not have his license with him, and reportedly showed him asking the other driver not to call the police, even offering to buy the man a new vehicle.
We pass that along the way it was reported, as an account, carefully. But you do not need to read between the lines very hard. The struggle that public reporting had described for years was no longer staying behind the scenes. It was spilling out into the street, into a parking lot, into the kind of moment that ends up in a Wire story. That incident wasn't the end, but his time as an NBA player was almost over, and he probably didn't know it. The end of a career is supposed to come with a final buzzer you can hear, a last big moment, something to remember. For Eddie Griffin, the end came almost in silence, so quietly that most people watching never realized they were watching it happen.
According to NBA game records, his final NBA game came on December 13, 2006, a Timberwolves loss to the San Antonio Spurs. And his line that night tells you everything about how far the role had collapsed. He played 48 seconds, not minutes, seconds. In that brief window, he recorded no statistics at all, except for one missed three-point attempt. That was it. The last time Eddie Griffin stepped onto an NBA floor, he was out there for under a minute, took one shot, missed it, and walked off. No one circled that date. No one knew it was the last one. The formal goodbye came a few months later.
According to NBA and Associated Press transaction records, the Timberwolves waived Griffin on March 13, 2007. The 3-year deal, the investment, the second chance in Minnesota, all of it closed right there. The door to the league shut, and this time it did not reopen. When you add it all up, the career totals read like a record of real talent that never fully arrived. Across 303 NBA games, Griffin averaged 7.2 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 1.7 blocks. Those are the numbers of a useful pro, a legitimate shot blocker who held a job in the best league in the world.
But measured against the kid who was the best high school player in the country, the freshman of the year, the lottery pick teams traded packages to land, those numbers are the sound of a ceiling that was never reached. According to one of his former coaches, Griffin spent that summer trying to fight his way back, this time toward a career overseas. A waived player has two choices. He can let the game go, or he can keep chasing it. At 25 years old, Eddie Griffin chose to keep chasing. According to Fox Sports, former Timberwolves coach Dwayne Casey said Griffin had spent that summer trying to get back into shape to play professionally in Europe.
Sit with that picture for a second, because it cuts against everything the headlines might lead you to expect. This was not a man who had given up on himself. This was a man in the gym, working, trying to drop weight and find his legs again, lining up a future on another continent. The NBA door had closed, so he went looking for a different door. The love of the game was still in him. That is the part of this story that makes it ache, because by every account, the talent was still there, and so was the will to use it.
A 25-year-old is young. There was still time, still a path, still a version of this story where Eddie Griffin reinvents himself overseas and writes a better ending. People do it all the time.
The summer of 2007 was supposed to be the bridge to that next chapter. But the same heavy thing he had carried for years was still with him, even as he worked. And the record of that summer points toward a single night that would override every plan he was making. According to police and news reports, the events of his final night unfolded at approximately 1:30 in the morning in Houston, Texas, the same city that had once bet on his ceiling. Hours later, on a railroad crossing in Houston, his story would end in a way no one could have prepared for. There is no soft way to tell the end of this story, so we will tell it plainly and with care, the way the official record laid it out. According to Houston police and ESPN reports, in the early hours of August 17, 2007, Eddie Griffin reportedly drove through a railroad barrier at a crossing, and his sport utility vehicle struck a moving train. He was 25 years old. The findings that followed were handled by the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office, which ruled the cause of passing multiple blunt force injuries. The same examination recorded a blood alcohol level of 0.26, more than 3 times the Texas legal limit of 0.08, while tests found no other substances present. We are not going to dress those numbers up or look away from them. They are part of the truth, and the truth is what this story has always been about. The man who could block shots better than almost anyone in the league. The man who had just spent a summer trying to fight his way back, lost that fight in the dark on a crossing in the same city where his pro career began. And this is where the whole story finally comes together. Everybody could see the talent. The scouts, the coaches, the fans, the city of Philadelphia that couldn't stop talking about him. The records prove it. The blocks prove it. The honors prove it. But the talent was never the thing fighting him. The thing fighting him lived somewhere the box score could never reach, somewhere the cameras never caught until it spilled into the open. The league saw a player. The people closest to him saw a young man wrestling with something far heavier than basketball. Eddie Griffin was gifted enough to reach the top of his sport before he could legally vote, and he was gone before he turned 26. That is the warning